Before we dive into one of the most terrifying encounters ever reported in American wilderness history, make sure to leave a like on this video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Trust me, you're going to want to remember where you were when you heard this story. The summer of 1953 was supposed to be unremarkable. That's what I kept telling myself as our camping group made our way deeper into the Maryland woods near the old Fletchertown Road area, just outside of Bowie. We were 6 men, friends from the war, bound together by shared memories of overseas trenches and a mutual need to escape the suffocating normalcy of post-war suburban life. My name is Thomas Whitmore, and I was 28 years old that summer. A veteran, a factory worker, and a skeptic of anything that couldn't be explained by science or common sense. The others in our group were much the same. Marcus Webb, our unofficial leader and the one who'd organized this trip. Jim Holloway, always with a cigarette between his lips and a joke on his tongue. Pete Richardson, quiet but dependable. Charlie Davis, who'd survived Normandy but jumped at every snapping twig. And finally, Robert Bobby Sullivan, the youngest among us at 23, eager to prove himself as tough as the rest of us. We'd chosen this particular stretch of wilderness for its remoteness. No tourists, no families with screaming children, no park rangers telling us where we could and couldn't set up camp. Just miles of dense Maryland forest, the kind that seemed to swallow sound and light in equal measure. The trees here were old, thick oaks and towering pines that had stood long before any of us were born, their branches creating a canopy so dense that even at noon, the forest floor remained in perpetual twilight. The first day passed without incident. We hiked for 6 hours, our boots crunching over dried leaves and fallen branches, our conversation light and punctuated by the occasional curse when someone's pack snagged on low-hanging brush. The air was thick with humidity, that particular heaviness that comes with Maryland summers, where your shirt clings to your back within minutes and gnats form small clouds around your face. By late afternoon, we'd found our spot, a small clearing near a creek that babbled over smooth stones, the water clear enough to see the brown and green pebbles lining its bed. Marcus declared it perfect, and we set about making camp. 3 tents went up in a loose triangle around a central fire pit that Pete dug out with practiced efficiency. We gathered firewood, strung up our food supplies between 2 trees to keep them away from bears, and settled in as the sun began its descent behind the tree line. That first night, we cooked beans and franks over the fire, passing around a flask of whiskey that Jim had smuggled along despite his wife's protests. The conversation flowed easily. Talk of jobs, families, the new Chevrolet models, whether the Yankees would win the series again. Normal things, safe things. The kind of talk that made you forget, at least temporarily, that just a decade ago we'd been watching friends die in foreign mud. Charlie was the first to mention the locals we'd passed on our way in. "Did you see how that old woman looked at us?" he said, poking at the fire with a stick. When Marcus asked her about good camping spots, she got this look on her face, like we'd told her we were planning to walk off a cliff. "She was just a superstitious old woman," Marcus replied, waving his hand dismissively. "These backwoods folks, they've got stories about everything. Probably thinks the forest is full of witches or some nonsense." But I remembered that woman too. She'd been standing outside a weathered general store, the kind of place that probably hadn't changed since the turn of the century. When Marcus had approached her with his map, asking about the best areas for camping, her face had gone pale. She'd leaned in close enough that I could smell tobacco and something medicinal on her breath, and said something that had struck me as odd even then. "Don't go past the creek with the split oak," she'd whispered, "and if you hear something calling to you at night, something that sounds like someone you know, don't answer. Don't even look." Marcus had thanked her politely and we'd moved on, but her words had lingered in my mind like smoke. Jim had laughed about it afterward, doing a mocking impression of her gravelly voice, but I'd noticed that Charlie hadn't joined in the laughter. "What do you think she meant?" Bobby asked now, his young face flickering in the firelight. "About not answering if something calls to you?" "Old wives' tales," Pete said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Every rural area has them. My grandmother used to tell stories about not whistling at night because it would attract spirits. Didn't stop me from whistling, and I'm still here." "Maybe," Charlie said quietly, staring into the flames. Or maybe there's a reason these stories stick around. An uncomfortable silence settled over our group. The forest around us had grown dark, the kind of absolute darkness you never experience in the city. Our fires seemed suddenly small and inadequate against the wall of black that pressed in from all sides. The cheerful babbling of the creek now sounded different somehow, less like water over stones and more like whispered conversations just beyond the edge of hearing. Well, I for one am not going to let some backwoods superstition ruin a perfectly good camping trip, Marcus declared, standing up and stretching. We've faced worse than dark forests and old women's warnings, haven't we, boys? A murmur of agreement went around the circle, though I noticed several of us glancing toward the darkness beyond our firelight. The truth was, facing human enemies, even in the horror of war, was different from facing the unknown. Bullets and bombs you could understand. They followed rules, obeyed physics. But the darkness in these woods felt like it contained something else entirely, something that didn't follow any rules we knew. "I'm turning in," Jim announced, crushing out his cigarette under his boot. "Long hike tomorrow if we want to reach that ridge Marcus keeps talking about." One by one, we retreated to our tents. Bobby and Charlie shared one, Pete and Jim another, while Marcus and I had the third. As I settled into my sleeping bag, I could hear the normal sounds of night settling over the camp, the rustle of fabric as the others got comfortable, the occasional cough, the pop and crackle of our dying fire. But underneath those familiar sounds, there was something else, a quality to the silence between sounds that felt expectant, like the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that the old woman's warnings had gotten into my head more than I wanted to admit, that I was a grown man, a veteran, and I had no business being spooked by shadows and silence. I was still telling myself that when I finally drifted off to sleep, unaware that our peaceful camping trip was about to become something none of us would ever forget, and that some of us wouldn't survive to tell anyone else. The warnings we'd received weren't superstition, they were a mercy, and we'd ignored them. The second day began like the first should have ended, peaceful, ordinary, forgettable. I woke to the smell of coffee brewing over rekindled flames and the sound of birds calling to each other through the canopy above. Marcus was already up, standing near the fire with a tin cup in his hands, watching steam rise into the cool morning air. The anxiety of the previous night seemed foolish now, washed away by daylight and the promise of strong coffee. "Sleep well?" Marcus asked as I emerged from the tent, rubbing sleep from my eyes. Well enough," I lied. The truth was I'd woken several times during the night, though I couldn't say what had disturbed me. No nightmares, no sounds, just an inexplicable feeling that something was watching our camp from the darkness beyond our fire's reach. The others stirred one by one. Jim emerged, looking haggard, complaining about roots digging into his back all night. Pete seemed his usual stoic self, nodding his good mornings and accepting coffee without comment. Charlie looked worse than Jim, dark circles under his eyes and a nervous energy in the way he moved, like a rabbit that knows there's a fox nearby but can't see where. Bobby was the last to emerge, and he looked the worst of all. His face was pale, almost gray in the morning light, and his hands shook slightly as he reached for the coffee pot. "You all right, kid?" Jim asked, genuine concern cutting through his usual joking demeanor. "Yeah, Bobby paused, glancing toward the tree line. "Did any of you hear something last night? Like voices?" The question hung in the air like smoke. I saw Marcus's jaw tighten, saw Charlie's hand freeze halfway to his mouth with his coffee cup. "What kind of voices?" Pete asked carefully. "I don't know. I woke up around 2, maybe 3 in the morning, and I could swear I heard someone talking, out there." He gestured vaguely toward the woods. It sounded like my brother, like Danny." "Your brother's in Ohio," Marcus said flatly. I know that. But I'm telling you, it sounded exactly like him. He was calling my name. "Bobby," he kept saying. "Bobby, come here, I need to show you something." "Dreams," Jim said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "Your mind playing tricks in a strange place?" "I wasn't asleep," Bobby insisted. "I was wide awake. I almost went out there. I had my hand on the tent zipper and everything. But then I remembered what that old woman said about not answering if something calls to you, and He trailed off, looking embarrassed. "Good thing you listened," Charlie said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. "I heard it too. Not your brother. I heard my wife." Sarah's voice clear as day, calling my name from somewhere past the creek. I thought maybe I was losing my mind, so I didn't say anything. But if Bobby heard it too... The morning suddenly felt colder. Marcus set his coffee down with a sharp clack of metal on stone. "All right, let's not panic here. Sound travels strangely in the woods, especially at night. There could be other campers nearby, voices carrying on the wind. Hell, it could be local kids playing pranks." "In the middle of nowhere?" Pete asked. "At 3 in the morning? I'm just saying, let's not jump to conclusions based on what might have been dreams or auditory tricks." Marcus's voice was firm, the voice of a sergeant trying to keep his men calm. "We came here to relax and enjoy nature. We're not going to let our imaginations run wild over some half-heard sounds in the night." We wanted to believe him. God, we wanted to believe him. So we nodded and murmured agreement and finished our coffee. And we convinced ourselves that daylight had burned away whatever strangeness the night had brought. We decided to explore deeper into the forest that day, following the creek upstream to see where it led. The plan was to find a good fishing spot, maybe catch some trout for dinner. Normal activities, the kind of thing men do on camping trips. The hike started pleasantly enough. The forest was beautiful in the morning light, dappled sunshine breaking through the canopy, the creek singing its endless song beside us, ferns unfurling in the shade like green feathers. We moved in a loose line, Marcus leading, then Jim, then Bobby, with Pete, Charlie, and me bringing up the rear. But as we walked deeper into the woods, following the creek's winding path, I began to notice things that unsettled me. The birdsong that had been so prevalent around our camp grew quieter, then stopped altogether. The only sound was our boots on the forest floor, our breathing, and the creek. Even the insects seemed to have gone silent. "Anyone else notice how quiet it's gotten?" Charlie whispered behind me. "I noticed," I replied, just as quietly. There was something about the silence that made you want to whisper, as if speaking at normal volume would disturb something that was better left undisturbed. We'd been walking for about an hour when Marcus stopped suddenly, holding up his hand. We all froze. "What is it?" Jim asked. Marcus pointed to something on the ground ahead. We gathered around and I felt my stomach drop. There, in a patch of soft mud near the creek's edge, was a print. But it wasn't like any animal track I'd ever seen. It was roughly the size of a human footprint, but the toes were wrong. Too long, too splayed, and there was something that looked like a cloven mark, like a deer's hoof, but mixed with something else. Something that suggested fingers rather than hooves. "What the hell is that?" Bobby breathed. Pete knelt down, studying the print carefully. He'd grown up in Montana, had hunted since he was old enough to hold a rifle. If anyone could identify an animal track, it was Pete. But Pete just shook his head slowly. "I don't know. It's not bear, not deer, not human. It's like something tried to make a human footprint but didn't quite know how." "That's ridiculous," Marcus said, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice now. "It's probably just a deformed deer print, or two prints overlapping." "Look at the depth," Pete said, pointing. "Whatever made this is heavy, and look here, and here." He pointed to more prints leading away from the creek and into the deeper woods. "It's walking on two legs, bipedal." "Bears walk on two legs sometimes," Jim offered. "Not like this. Bears leave claw marks. There are no claw marks here. And the stride length," Pete stood, pacing out the distance between prints. "This thing has legs longer than any man, maybe 7 feet tall, maybe taller." The forest suddenly felt much larger and we much smaller. The silence pressed in on us like a physical weight. "We should head back," Charlie said. No one argued with him this time. We turned back toward camp, moving faster now, our earlier relaxed pace abandoned. Nobody spoke much on the return journey. We were all too busy listening to the silent forest around us, too busy watching the shadows between the trees, too aware that something had been near our camp, something that left prints that shouldn't exist. We reached camp by early afternoon, and despite the warmth of the day, we built up the fire larger than necessary. There's something primal about fire. It pushes back the darkness, both literal and metaphorical. We sat close to it, even though the heat made us sweat. "I vote we pack up and head back," Charlie said as we ate a lunch none of us really tasted. Cut the trip short, no shame in it. We're not going to run away because of some weird footprints, Marcus said, but his heart wasn't in it anymore. It's not just the footprints, Bobby said quietly. It's everything. The voices last night, the silence in the forest, that warning from the old woman. I've got a bad feeling about this place, like we're somewhere we're not supposed to be. He's right, I found myself saying. Something feels off about this area, has from the start. Marcus looked at each of us in turn. I could see him warring with himself, his pride and his role as leader, demanding we stay, his instincts screaming at him to listen. Let's compromise, Pete suggested. We stay one more night. Keep a watch rotation. If anything else happens, anything at all, we pack up at first light. Deal? It wasn't a good solution, but it was the one we accepted. We spent the rest of the afternoon in camp, ostensibly resting, but really just staying close to each other in the fire. No one wanted to venture into the woods alone, not even for a bathroom break. We went in pairs and we went armed, hunting knives at our belts, the one rifle we'd brought loaded and propped near the fire. As evening approached, the temperature began to drop. Not unusual for Maryland in the summer, the nights could get surprisingly cool. But this felt different. This felt like the cold that comes from something other than mere absence of sunlight. We made dinner as the sun set. Canned stew heated over the fire, more coffee, the last of Jim's whiskey passed around. The alcohol helped warm us, but it couldn't touch the coldness that had settled in my chest. First watch, Marcus announced. I'll take it. Then Pete. Then Tom. 3-hour shifts. Everyone else get some sleep while you can. As darkness fell completely, we retreated to our tents again. But this time, there was no casual conversation, no jokes or stories. We lay in our sleeping bags, tense and listening. I don't know how long I'd been lying there, maybe an hour, maybe 2, when I heard it. A voice. My mother's voice. Thomas, she called softly from somewhere beyond the firelight. Thomas, sweetheart, I need you. My mother had been dead for 3 years. I felt my breath catch in my throat. My hand found my flashlight, gripping it so tightly my knuckles went white. Beside me in the tent, I heard Marcus's breathing change. He was awake too. Thomas, the voice came again, and it sounded so much like her, the gentle tone she'd used when I was a child and had woken from nightmares. Please come here. I want to show you something. Don't, Marcus whispered in the darkness. Don't respond. Don't even move. But God help me. I wanted to. Some part of my brain knew it couldn't be her, knew it was impossible. But another part, the part that still missed her, that would give anything to hear her voice one more time, that part wanted to unzip the tent and go to her. Thomas? The voice had changed slightly. Still my mother's voice, but with an edge to it now. A questioning tone that held something else underneath. Something that sounded almost hungry. From the other tents I could hear movement. Others had heard it too, or were hearing their own versions of it. The voice that sounded like my mother called my name 3 more times, each time from a slightly different location, as if circling our camp. Then it stopped. For several minutes, there was only silence. Then, from the darkness beyond our fire's reach, came something else. Not a voice this time. A sound I'd never heard before and hope never to hear again. It started low, almost like a growl, but it rose in pitch, becoming something between a scream and a laugh. It echoed through the trees, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It lasted maybe 5 seconds, but those 5 seconds felt like an eternity. When it finally stopped, the silence that followed was absolute. We leave at first light, Marcus said quietly in the darkness. No debate, no discussion. First light, we pack up and we get the hell out of here. Agreed, I whispered back. Neither of us slept the rest of that night. Neither did anyone else in camp, I suspect. We lay in the darkness, listening to the silence, waiting for either dawn or the thing that mimicked voices to return. Dawn couldn't come fast enough, but when it did come, we would discover that the night's terrors had only been a preview. The real horror was still waiting for us. Dawn broke over our camp like a reprieve from execution. Temporary, uncertain, but desperately welcome. We emerged from our tents haggard and hollow-eyed, moving with the stiff caution of men who'd spent the night expecting attack. The fire had burned down to cold ashes. Marcus must have let it die during his watch, too afraid to move, too afraid that feeding it would draw attention to our presence. "Everyone accounted for?" Marcus asked, his voice hoarse from disuse and fear. We did a quick head count. 6 men, all present, all alive. That should have been a relief, but somehow it felt more like we'd merely survived the first round of something much worse. "We pack light and we pack fast," Marcus said. "Leave anything that's not essential. I want us out of here within the hour." No one argued. We moved with military efficiency, breaking down tents, stuffing sleeping bags into packs without bothering to roll them properly, abandoning the heavier equipment we'd brought. The fishing gear stayed, the extra food stayed. We kept only what we could carry at a near run. I was shoving my clothes into my pack when Bobby called out from near the creek. "Guys, you need to see this." The tone of his voice made my blood run cold. It wasn't fear exactly. It was worse. It was defeat. The sound of someone who's just realized that escape might not be possible. We gathered at the creek's edge where Bobby stood, and I felt my stomach turn to ice. The footprints we'd seen yesterday were back, but they weren't just near the creek anymore. They circled our entire camp, a complete ring of those impossible prints, as if something had walked around and around us all night while we cowered in our tents. The prints came within feet of where we'd slept, close enough that whatever made them could have reached out and touched the tent fabric. "It was here," Charlie whispered. "Right here, all night, just watching us." "Or deciding which one of us to take first," Jim added, and no one told him to shut up because we were all thinking the same thing. Pete knelt by one of the prints and his face went even paler than it already was. "These are fresh, maybe an hour old. It was here at dawn. It waited for us," I heard myself say. "It knew we'd come out eventually." Marcus pulled out his compass, checked it, then checked it again with a frown. That's not right." "What's not right?" "The compass. It's spinning. Look." He held it out, and sure enough, the needle was slowly rotating, unable to find north. "It was working fine yesterday." "Magnetic interference?" Pete suggested, but he didn't sound convinced. "From what? We're in the middle of a forest in Maryland, not standing on a deposit of magnetite." I pulled out my own compass. Same result. The needle spun lazily, as if north had ceased to exist or moved to somewhere the instrument couldn't comprehend. "Doesn't matter," Marcus said, shoving the compass back in his pocket. "We follow the creek back the way we came. We don't need a compass for that." We shouldered our packs and started walking, moving faster than we had on any hike before. The plan was simple. Follow the creek downstream back to where we'd entered the forest, then find the trail that would take us to the road where we'd parked our cars. A few hours of hard hiking at most, except the creek didn't look the same as it had yesterday. The water was darker, murkier, as if something had stirred up sediment upstream, and the path alongside it seemed narrower, the trees pressing closer. I told myself it was just my fear distorting my perception, that everything looks different when you're scared. But after an hour of walking, we should have recognized landmarks. The fallen log we'd passed, the distinctive boulder shaped like a bear's head, the place where the creek forked around a small island. We saw none of these things. "Are we going the right way?" Bobby asked, voicing what we were all thinking. Marcus stopped, looking around with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. Complete disorientation. "This should be familiar. We came this way yesterday. I remember that tree, the one with the split trunk. We passed it on our way in." "That tree wasn't split yesterday," Pete said quietly. We all turned to look at the tree Marcus had indicated. It was split, all right. Split right down the middle as if struck by lightning. The wood blackened and twisted. But Pete was right. We would have noticed this yesterday. A tree this damaged, this distinctive. We would have remarked on it. Maybe we passed. "A different tree," Jim offered weakly. "Or maybe the forest changed," Charlie said. "Maybe it's changing, keeping us here." "Forests don't change overnight," Marcus snapped, but there was no conviction in his voice. We kept walking, but the sense of wrongness grew stronger with each step. The creek began to curve in ways I didn't remember. The trees seemed to shift positions when we weren't looking directly at them. Twice, I could have sworn we passed the same distinctive rock formation, even though we'd been walking in a straight line. It was Bobby who first suggested what we were all beginning to suspect. We're walking in circles, aren't we? It's keeping us here. Whatever it is, it's not letting us leave. That's impossible, Marcus said, but his words rang hollow even to himself. Is it? Charlie turned on him, fear turning to anger. Is it impossible? Was your mother's voice calling to Tom last night impossible? Were those footprints impossible? At what point do we stop saying that's impossible and start accepting that we're dealing with something that doesn't care about what should or shouldn't be possible? Marcus had no answer for that. We stopped to rest near the creek, our fear now mixing with exhaustion. We'd been walking for nearly 3 hours and seemed no closer to escape than when we'd started. I pulled out my canteen, took a sip, and immediately spit it out. The water tasted wrong. Metallic and bitter, with an underlying taste that reminded me of spoiled meat. I'd filled this canteen from the creek yesterday, and it had been fine then. Now it was barely drinkable. Don't drink from the creek, I warned the others. Something's wrong with the water. Jim had already knelt to fill his canteen. He looked down at the water, then recoiled. Jesus Christ. We gathered around and looked into the creek. The water was running red. Not the brownish red of sediment or clay, but the deep crimson of blood. It flowed past us in lazy spirals, staining the rocks along the banks. Upstream, Pete said, pointing. Something upstream. A dead animal, maybe, decomposing. That much blood? I asked. That would have to be a pretty big animal, a bear maybe, or... I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't need to. We were all thinking the same thing. Or something bigger. We're not following the creek anymore, Marcus decided. We head perpendicular to it, due west. Eventually we'll hit the road or at least find some landmark we recognize. We turned away from the creek and its blood-red water, pushing into the forest proper. The trees grew denser here, the canopy thicker. Within minutes, the creek was no longer visible behind us, its sound fading to nothing. That should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like we'd just cut our last connection to something familiar. Something that at least pretended to follow the normal rules of reality. The forest here felt older somehow. The trees were massive, their trunks wider than any I'd seen before. The ground was soft with centuries of fallen leaves, deadening our footsteps. And the silence, that terrible silence, was absolute. Stay close, Marcus ordered. Nobody wanders off, nobody falls behind. We moved in a tight group now, almost shoulder to shoulder. The forest pressed in around us, and I had the distinct impression that the trees were watching us. Their branches hung overhead like gnarled fingers, and the spaces between them seemed to shift and move in my peripheral vision. That's when Jim stopped suddenly. Do you smell that? We all paused, sniffing the air. There was a smell, faint at first but growing stronger. It was the smell of rot and decay, but underneath it was something else. Something animal and rank, like wet fur and musk. Something died nearby, Pete said, recently. Or something lives nearby, Charlie corrected. The smell grew stronger as we walked, becoming almost unbearable. We pulled our shirts up over our noses, breathing through our mouths, but it did little good. The stench seemed to coat the inside of my throat, making me gag. Then Bobby pointed through the trees ahead. What is that? We moved forward cautiously, and I felt my knees nearly give out at what we found. Hanging from the branches of a massive oak were the carcasses of animals. Dozens of them, deer, rabbits, raccoons, even what looked like a black bear cub. They hung from ropes made of twisted vines, suspended at various heights. But it wasn't natural predation. These animals had been arranged, positioned deliberately. Some hung upside down, their throats cut, long dried blood staining their fur. Others were posed in grotesque positions, their limbs bent at impossible angles, and on the trunk of the oak, carved deep into the bark, were symbols I'd never seen before. Geometric patterns and shapes that hurt to look at too long, as if they were trying to convey meaning that human eyes weren't meant to process. What the hell is this? Jim breathed. A warning, Charlie said, or a territory marker. This thing, whatever it is, it's telling us this is its hunting ground. Then we're the prey, Bobby said, his voice cracking. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but as I looked at those hanging carcasses, at the way they'd been displayed like trophies or warnings or some twisted form of art, I realized he was right. We'd walked into something's territory, something that killed for reasons beyond simple hunger. "We need to move. Now." Marcus's voice was steady, but I could see his hands shaking. "Back the way we came, fast." We turned to retrace our steps, moving at nearly a run now, but we'd only gone maybe 50 yards when Pete, bringing up the rear, grabbed my shoulder. "Stop, don't move, don't make a sound." We froze. Pete was staring back the way we'd come, his face completely drained of color. "It's following us," he whispered. "I just saw it, between those two pines. It's pacing us." "What did it look like?" Marcus asked, quietly. "Tall, 7, maybe 8 feet, walking on 2 legs but hunched over. It had horns, curved horns like a goat, but the body was wrong. The arms were too long, and the hands..." He stopped, swallowing hard. The hands looked almost human, but the legs were bent backward, like a goat's legs. The Goatman. The creature from local legend, the story we'd dismissed as folklore and superstition. It was real. It had always been real. And it was hunting us. "Can you see it now?" Jim asked. Pete shook his head. "It moved, it's gone, but it's out there, watching." We started moving again, faster now, abandoning any pretense of calm. We crashed through the underbrush, branches whipping at our faces, our boots catching on roots and stones. Behind us, I could hear something moving parallel to our path, not following directly, but keeping pace, hurting us. "It's playing with us," I realized aloud. "It could have attacked at any time, but it's playing with us, wearing us down." "Then we don't give it the satisfaction," Marcus said. "We stick together, we keep moving, A scream cut him off. We spun around. Bobby was gone. He'd been right behind Pete not 5 seconds ago. Now there was just empty forest where he'd been standing. "Bobby!" Charlie called out. "Bobby!" "Shh!" Marcus hissed. "You'll draw it right to us." "It already knows where we are," Charlie shot back. "Bobby, where are you?" For a moment there was only silence. Then, from somewhere deep in the forest, we heard Bobby's voice. "Help! Help me! It's got me! Please!" The voice was coming from ahead of us, deeper into the forest. We started to run toward it, but Pete grabbed Marcus's arm. "Wait, listen." We stopped. Bobby's voice was still calling for help, but now I heard what Pete had noticed. The voice was off. The cadence was wrong, the pitch slightly too high. And underneath the words there was something else, a wet clicking sound, like someone trying to speak while choking on water. "That's not Bobby," Pete said. As if in confirmation, we heard another voice. Bobby's voice again, but this time from a completely different direction. "Guys, where are you? I can't find my way back." Then another Bobby voice from our left. "Help me, it hurts." And another from behind us. "Please don't leave me." 4 different Bobby voices, all calling to us from 4 different directions, all identical, but somehow fundamentally wrong. "Oh God," Charlie moaned. "Oh God, where is he? Where's the real Bobby?" Then we heard it, a 5th voice, distant and faint, but somehow more real than the others. Bobby's voice, screaming in genuine terror from somewhere far off to our right. "Help! Someone help me! It's..." The scream cut off abruptly. We stood frozen, surrounded by fake voices calling to us from the darkness between the trees, while somewhere out there, the real Bobby had just been silenced. "We have to find him," Charlie said, starting toward where we'd heard the real scream. "No," Marcus grabbed him, held him back. "That's what it wants. Split us up, take us one by one. We can't just leave him. If we go after him, we'll die too. All of us. We need to..." Marcus never finished the sentence. From directly above us came a sound that froze the blood in my veins. That same growl scream we'd heard the night before, but closer now. Much closer. So close I could feel the vibration of it in my chest. We looked up. In the branches above us, barely visible among the leaves and shadows, something looked back. I caught only a glimpse before my mind refused to fully process what I was seeing. A shape too large to be human, too distorted to be natural. The horns Pete had described, yes, but also a face that was somehow both goat and man and neither. Eyes that reflected our terror back at us with what might have been intelligence, or might have been hunger, or might have been something worse. Enjoyment. Then it moved, not jumping down to attack, but leaping from branch to branch with impossible grace, circling above us, staying just barely out of clear sight, toying with us. "Run," Marcus said quietly. "What?" Run! We ran. We crashed through the forest in blind panic, all strategy abandoned. Branches tore at our faces and clothes. Roots tried to trip us. The forest itself seemed to fight our escape. But we didn't stop. Behind us, above us, all around us, we could hear it moving. Sometimes on the ground, sometimes in the trees, sometimes in places that sound shouldn't have been able to come from. And all the while, Bobby's voice, or the thing mimicking Bobby's voice, called to us from the darkness. Please help me. Don't leave me here. I'm scared. It hurts. I don't know how long we ran. Time had lost meaning. Minutes or hours, it was all the same nightmare of motion and terror. We stayed together through sheer force of will and luck, none of us wanting to end up like Bobby, alone in the dark with that thing. Finally, we burst through a thick stand of brush and found ourselves in a clearing. And in the center of that clearing, standing with his back to us, was Bobby. He was completely still, just standing there, arms at his sides. He didn't turn when we crashed into the clearing, didn't react to Charlie calling his name. Bobby? Charlie took a step forward. Bobby, are you okay? The figure that looked like Bobby slowly turned around. His face was wrong. The features were Bobby's. I could recognize them individually. But the expression, the way they sat on his face, the angle of his head, it was all subtly off, like a mask that didn't quite fit. And when he smiled, the smile was too wide, too many teeth. He's not here anymore, the thing wearing Bobby's face said in Bobby's voice. But underneath the familiar tone was that clicking, wet sound we'd heard before. He went away, but I'm still here. I'm always here. Then its face began to change. The features shifted and melted, rearranging themselves. For a moment, it looked like Jim, then Pete, then Marcus. The face flickered between all of us like it was trying them on, seeing which fit best. All the while, that too wide smile never faltered. Which one should I be? It asked in a voice that was all of our voices layered on top of each other. Which one would make you feel safe? Which one would make you trust me? Run, Pete whispered. On 3. 1, 2. Before he reached 3, the thing that had been wearing Bobby's face dropped to all fours and charged. We scattered into the trees, and behind us, that terrible scream laugh echoed through the forest once more. The real horror had begun. We ran until our lungs burned and our legs threatened to give out beneath us. We ran until we couldn't hear that terrible scream laugh anymore, until the only sounds were our ragged breathing and the pounding of our boots against the forest floor. When we finally stopped, collapsing against the trunk of a fallen tree, I counted heads through vision blurred by sweat and terror. 5 of us left: Marcus, Jim, Pete, Charlie, and me. Bobby was gone. Whether dead or taken or transformed into something wearing his face, we didn't know. Maybe we'd never know. We need a plan, Marcus gasped between breaths. Can't just keep running. What plan? Charlie's voice was pitched high with hysteria. What plan works against that? It took Bobby. It wore his face like a goddamn Halloween mask. It can be anywhere, look like anyone. How do we fight that? We can't fight it, Pete said flatly. We need to survive it. There's a difference. All right then, genius. How do we survive it? Jim snapped, fear making him angry. Pete looked around at the forest surrounding us, then up at the sky barely visible through the canopy. It's been hurting us, away from the road, away from help. It's kept us moving deeper into its territory. So we stop moving where it wants us to go. Meaning what? Meaning we pick our ground, find somewhere defensible, make it come to us on our terms, not its. And then what? I asked. We still can't kill it. We don't even know what it is. No, Pete agreed. But maybe we can hurt it enough to make it lose interest. Animals, even supernatural ones, don't usually fight to the death when they can find easier prey. It was thin hope, but it was better than nothing. We gathered what weapons we had: 2 hunting knives, 1 small hatchet Jim had brought for firewood, and the rifle with 7 rounds. Not much against a creature that could tear through trees and mimic human faces, but it was all we had. There, Marcus pointed to a rocky outcropping about 30 yards ahead. High ground, limited approaches. We can see it coming. We moved toward the rocks, checking over our shoulders every few steps. The forest remained silent around us. No birds, no insects, no sound of pursuit. Somehow that silence was worse than the creature's screams would have been. At least screams told you where it was. The outcropping was better than I'd hoped. A natural formation of limestone that jutted up about 15 feet with a relatively flat top big enough for all 5 of us. 3 sides were sheer rock, climbable but difficult. Only one side had an easier approach, a natural ramp of broken stone and earth. We climbed to the top and immediately set about preparing our defense. Pete and Jim pried loose rocks free, creating a pile of projectiles we could throw down at anything that tried to climb up. Marcus took position with the rifle, settling himself where he had a clear view of all approaches. Charlie and I armed ourselves with the knife and hatchet respectively, taking up positions on either side of the main approach. Then, we waited. The sun had passed its zenith and was beginning its afternoon descent. We'd been in these woods for less than 2 full days, but it felt like a lifetime. The bright, optimistic men who'd driven here with fishing gear and stories to tell had been replaced by these hollow-eyed survivors, jumping at every shadow. "What do you think it wants?" Charlie asked quietly. "The creature. Why didn't it just kill us all when it had the chance?" "Maybe it feeds on fear as much as flesh," Pete suggested. "Maybe terror makes the meat taste better." "Or maybe it's just cruel," I said. "Maybe it enjoys the hunt more than the kill." "Does it matter?" Marcus asked, eyes still pressed to the rifle sight. "Whether it's hungry or evil or bored, the result's the same for us." He was right, of course, but sitting there waiting for something to attack is worse than running. When you're running, you don't have time to think, you just act on instinct. But waiting gives your mind time to work, to imagine, to conjure terrors worse than reality. An hour passed, then 2. The shadows grew longer. The temperature dropped as the sun sank lower in the sky. "Maybe it gave up," Jim said, though none of us believed it. "Maybe it decided we weren't worth the effort." "Maybe," I agreed, knowing it was a lie. That's when we heard the singing. It started soft and distant, barely audible over the whisper of wind through leaves. A woman's voice, singing a lullaby. The tune was familiar, something from my childhood, something my mother used to sing. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word." The voice grew closer, clearer. It was coming from the trees at the base of our outcropping. "Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird." "Don't listen to it," Marcus ordered. "Don't respond. It's trying to draw us out." But the voice was so sweet, so comforting. After hours of terror, it promised safety, warmth, love. I felt my body swaying toward it, wanting to go to that voice, to be held and told everything would be okay. "Tom," Marcus's sharp tone snapped me back. "Stay focused." The singing stopped abruptly. For a moment, there was silence. Then we heard movement in the brush below. Not trying to be stealthy now, it wanted us to hear it circling, pacing around our position like a wolf around a sheepfold. "Show yourself!" Marcus shouted, rifle ready. "Come on, you bastard, show yourself!" The movement stopped. The forest held its breath. Then, stepping out from behind a massive oak tree, it emerged. In daylight, it was somehow worse than the glimpse we'd caught in the trees. It stood upright on legs that bent backward at the knee, like a goat's hind legs, ending in cloven hooves that dug into the soft earth. But from the waist up, it was almost human. Almost. The torso was too long, the arms too lengthy, ending in hands that had too many fingers tipped with black claws. The skin was covered in coarse, dark hair that might have been fur or might have been something else. But the head, God, the head, that's what made my mind rebel against what I was seeing. It was a goat's skull, bleached white bone with massive curved horns, but set atop that human-like neck. And where the eyes should have been empty sockets, there were eyes, human eyes, aware, intelligent, malicious. And it was smiling. Somehow, though it had only bone where a mouth should be, it was smiling at us. "Jesus Christ," Jim breathed. The goatman tilted its head, studying us. Then it spoke. "You should have listened to the old woman." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, echoing inside our skulls as much as through the air. It spoke with Bobby's voice, with all our voices, with voices we'd never heard. "She tried to warn you. They all tried to warn you, but you didn't listen. You never listen." "What do you want?" Marcus demanded, rifle aimed at the creature's chest. "Want?" It laughed, and the sound was like bones breaking. "I don't want. I am. I've been here longer than your kind has had names for things like me. I'll be here long after your dust. You came into my woods, you breathed my air, you drank my water. What I want is irrelevant. What matters is that you're mine now. We're leaving, Marcus said. Let us go and we'll never come back. We'll tell no one about this place. Leave? The creature took a step closer to the base of our outcropping. You think you can just leave? You think I herded you here, wore you down, took your friend just to let you walk away? Another step. No, one of you might leave, maybe, if you entertain me enough, if you make the right choice. What choice? I heard myself ask. The goatman pointed one too long finger at us. One of you can go, the rest stay, forever. Choose who lives and who feeds my forest. Choose now, or I choose for you, and I promise my choice will hurt more. Go to hell, Marcus spat. Already there, it replied. This forest is my hell and my heaven, and now it's yours too. Then it charged. It moved with impossible speed, crossing the distance to the base of our outcropping in 2 bounds. Marcus fired, the rifle crack echoing through the trees. The bullet caught the creature in the shoulder, spraying something dark that wasn't quite blood. It screamed, that terrible scream laugh, but didn't slow down. It hit the rock face and began to climb, those clawed hands finding purchase in stone, hauling itself up with terrifying ease. We threw rocks, hitting it again and again, but it kept coming. Marcus fired twice more, both shots hitting but not stopping it. When it reached the top, pulling itself over the edge onto our platform, we attacked as one. Jim swung the hatchet, catching it across the arm. The blade bit deep, and the creature shrieked, backhanding Jim with such force that he flew backward, hitting the rock hard enough that I heard bones crack. He lay still, blood pooling beneath his head. Pete lunged with his knife, aiming for the thing's throat. The goatman caught his wrist, twisted, and I heard Pete's arm snap like a dry branch. He screamed and fell back, cradling his ruined arm. I came at it from the side with my knife, slashing wildly. I felt the blade connect, felt it slice through fur and flesh. The creature turned on me, those human eyes burning with rage, and swung one massive hand at my head. I ducked, barely, feeling the wind of its passing. Marcus was reloading, hands shaking, trying to chamber another round. "Keep it busy!" he shouted. Charlie, weaponless but desperate, picked up a jagged rock and brought it down on the creature's knee. Something crunched, and the goatman's leg buckled. For a moment, just a moment, I thought we might actually hurt it enough to drive it off. Then, it grabbed Charlie by the throat with one hand and lifted him off his feet like he weighed nothing. Charlie's eyes bulged, his hands clawing at the thing's wrist, his legs kicking uselessly in the air. "Choose," the goatman said, looking at Marcus and me. "Choose now, or I take all of you." Marcus raised the rifle, aiming at the creature's head. "Let him go." "Choose." Marcus's finger tightened on the trigger. The creature squeezed, and I heard Charlie's neck bones grinding together. Charlie's face was turning purple, his struggles growing weaker. "All right," I screamed. "All right, take me! Let them go! Take me!" "No!" Marcus shouted. "Yes," I said, looking at Charlie's fading consciousness, at Jim's still form, at Pete curled up with his broken arm. "Take me! Let them live!" The goatman's smile widened. Impossible, since it had only bone for a mouth, but I swear I saw it widen. Brave. Stupid, but brave. However, it looked at Marcus. He didn't choose you. He gets to choose. It threw Charlie aside like a rag doll. He hit the rock and didn't move. Then the creature turned its full attention to Marcus. "Choose," it repeated. "You're the leader. You brought them here. So choose. Which one walks away? The broken one?" It gestured to Pete. "The unconscious one?" A nod toward Jim. "The still one?" Charlie. "Or the volunteer?" Me. Marcus stood there, rifle shaking in his hands, and I watched something break inside him. The weight of leadership, of responsibility, of having to decide who lives and who dies, it was too much. "I'll stay," he whispered. "Take me. Let all of them go." "No!" The goatman's roar shook the rocks beneath our feet. "That's not the game. You don't get to be the hero. You choose another or you all die here, now." Marcus looked at each of us in turn. At Jim, probably dead or dying. At Pete, clutching his broken arm, tears of pain streaming down his face. At Charlie, unconscious and barely breathing. At me, standing there with my useless knife, trying to look braver than I felt. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, and I saw tears on his face. "I'm so sorry." He pointed the rifle at me. "Him." He volunteered. "Take him." The betrayal hit harder than any physical blow could have. I'd offered myself, yes, but having my friend, my brother from the war, actually choose me, actually point that rifle at me. "Excellent," the Goatman purred. "See how easy that was? The volunteer makes it clean. No guilt, no real choice, just acceptance." It turned to me, and those human eyes studied me with something that might have been respect. "You offered yourself freely. Twice. That means something, even here. So I'll give you a gift, brave one. I'll make it quick. The others..." It looked at Marcus. "The others get to live with what they chose." Then it spoke words that still haunt me. "Run. I'll give you 10 seconds. If you reach the tree line, I'll let you go. If not..." It smiled, that impossible smile. "Well, we'll see." "That's not fair," Marcus said. I said take him. I'm taking him, but he gets to run first. Call it sporting chance." The creature crouched, ready to pounce. 10 seconds, starting now. I ran. I've never run faster in my life. I leaped off the outcropping, hit the ground hard, rolled, and kept running. Behind me, I heard the Goatman counting in that terrible multi-voice. 9, 8, 7. I crashed through brush, vaulted over fallen logs, ran like hell itself was at my heels, because it was. 6, 5, 4. My lungs burned, my legs screamed. The forest blurred around me. 3, 2. I saw the tree line ahead, thinning out into what looked like open ground. Almost there. Almost. 1. The impact hit me from behind like a freight train. I went down hard, face first into the dirt, the creature's weight crushing me. Its hot breath was on the back of my neck, smelling of rot and old meat. This was it. This was how I died. But then, impossibly, the weight lifted. I heard the Goatman's breath, ragged and somehow uncertain. "You reached the tree line," it said, and there was something in its voice I hadn't heard before. Surprise? Respect? "Your fingers. Look." I turned my head, looked at my outstretched hand. My fingertips were over the line where dense forest gave way to sparse trees and scrub. Barely over, but over. "The old rules," the creature said, standing. "The old boundaries. Even I must honor them." It sounded almost disappointed. "You're free. For now." It stepped back into the shadows of the dense forest and pointed one clawed finger at me. "But know this, brave one. You've been marked. You've seen me, touched my domain, offered yourself to me. The mark doesn't wash off. And one day, when you least expect it, when you've almost forgotten this place, I'll come for you. Maybe in a year, maybe in 10, maybe on your deathbed. But I'll come. And when I do," it continued, fading into the darkness between the trees, "there won't be any rules to save you." Then it was gone, melting into the forest like it had never been there at all. I lay there for what felt like hours, afraid to move, afraid it was a trick. But eventually, I dragged myself to my feet. My body was covered in cuts and bruises, my clothes torn, but I was alive. I turned back toward the outcropping where I'd left the others. I should go back, help them, get them out. But the forest between me and them was dark and deep, and I knew with absolute certainty that if I went back in there, the rules wouldn't protect me. The boundary only worked one way. "Oh, I'm sorry," I whispered to the forest, to my friends, to myself. "I'm so sorry." Then I turned and walked away, leaving them in those woods, leaving them with the Goatman and their choices and their guilt. I walked until I hit a road, flagged down a car, told them there had been an accident, led the police and search parties back, but we never found the exact location. The forest had changed again, or I couldn't remember the way, or something. They searched for 3 days, found nothing, no bodies, no campsite, no evidence we'd ever been there at all. Eventually, they declared it a case of missing persons. 5 men went into the Maryland woods and never came out. Or 4 men never came out, and 1 came out changed. I've lived with the guilt for months now. December 1953, and I still wake up screaming, hearing Marcus's voice saying, "Him, take him," Still see the Goatman's human eyes watching me from the shadows. Still feel the mark it burned into my soul. The others, Marcus, Jim, Pete, Charlie, I don't know what happened to them, whether they died quickly or slowly, whether the creature kept them or just killed them, whether some part of them is still in those woods, trapped forever in the Goatman's domain. I only know that I got out, and that knowledge, that survival, feels less like a gift and more like a punishment, because now I have to live with what I saw, what we did to each other, what fear can make good men become. And I have to wait, knowing that one day the Goatman will come to collect what I owe. The mark doesn't wash off. It never does. The police report from November 1953 lists 5 men as missing, presumed dead. Marcus Webb, age 32, Jim Holloway, 31, Pete Richardson, 33, Charlie Davis, 29, and Robert Sullivan, 23. My name, Thomas Whitmore, appears only as the reporting witness, the man who walked out, the man who survived. The official story I told was simple. We got separated during a hike. I went for help. By the time I led searchers back, I couldn't find the area where we'd camped. The forest all looked the same. The search parties combed those woods for 72 hours and found nothing. No tents, no supplies, no bodies, no sign anyone had ever been there at all. They asked me questions, of course. How could 5 experienced men simply vanish? Why couldn't I find my way back to the campsite? Had there been an argument? A fight? Was I hiding something? I stuck to my story. We got separated. I got lost. I found my way out. I came back with help. That's all I knew. They suspected me. I could tell. The detective assigned to the case, a tired-looking man named Halloran, kept circling back to the same questions in different ways, trying to catch me in a contradiction. But there were no contradictions because the truth was both simpler and more impossible than any lie I could have concocted. "Mr. Whitmore," Halloran said during our final interview, leaning across the table with his coffee-stained tie brushing the paperwork between us. 5 men don't just disappear. In 30 years on this job, I've seen a lot of things, but 5 grown men vanishing without a trace? That doesn't happen, not naturally. I know how it sounds, I replied, staring at my hands. The scratches and cuts had healed, but I could still feel them. I know what you're thinking, but I'm telling you the truth. We got separated. I got out. They didn't. That's all I know. Halloran studied me for a long moment. You know what I think, Mr. Whitmore? I think something happened in those woods. Something that scared you so badly you can barely sleep. I can see it in your eyes. And I think you're not telling me the whole story because the whole story sounds too crazy to believe. He was right, of course. But what could I tell him? That we'd been hunted by a creature out of nightmare and folklore? That it had worn our friend's face like a mask? That it had made us choose who lived and who died? That I'd been marked by something that existed outside the rules of the world he knew? They would have put me in an asylum. I've told you everything I remember, I said quietly. I wish I had more to give you. I wish I could bring them home to their families. But I can't. Eventually, they had to let it go. No bodies meant no crime scene. No evidence meant no case. The official conclusion was that 5 men had gotten lost in the Maryland wilderness and perished from exposure, wild animals, or misadventure. Their bodies would turn up eventually, the report concluded. Maybe next spring when the snow melted, maybe years from now, discovered by hunters or hikers. But I knew better. Those woods wouldn't give up their dead. The Goatman kept what was his. The funerals were the hardest part. Or rather, the memorial services. You can't have a funeral without a body. I attended all 5, sitting in the back, unable to meet the eyes of the widows and parents and children who had lost their husbands and sons and fathers. At Marcus's service, his wife Jennifer approached me afterward. She was a small woman, made smaller by grief, her eyes red from weeks of crying. "Thomas," she said, taking my hands in hers, "please, tell me the truth. What happened to my husband?" I wanted to tell her, wanted to explain that he died trying to protect us, that he'd made an impossible choice under impossible circumstances, that the thing that killed him was beyond our ability to fight or comprehend. But I couldn't. So I said what I'd said to everyone. I don't know. We got separated. I'm so sorry. She searched my face, looking for something. Truth, closure, meaning in the meaningless. He wouldn't have just left you. Marcus wouldn't abandon his friends. Something happened, something you're not telling me. I'm sorry, I repeated, because it was all I had left to give. She let go of my hands and turned away, and I watched her walk back to her children, 2 boys, 8 and 10, who would grow up without their father, who would be told their dad was a hero who got lost in the woods when the truth was he'd been forced to choose which of his friends would die. I didn't attend Bobby's service. I couldn't face his mother, knowing that her youngest son's last moments had been spent screaming in terror as something wore his skin and spoke with his voice. The weeks after the memorials blurred together. I tried to return to my old life, my job at the factory, my apartment, my routines, but nothing fit right anymore. The world felt thin somehow, like a photograph of reality rather than reality itself. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still in those woods, still running, and that everything since had been just another trick of the Goatman. The nightmares came every night. Sometimes I was back on that outcropping, watching the creature climb toward us. Sometimes I was running through the forest while Bobby's voice called to me from a dozen different directions. Sometimes I was frozen in place while the Goatman studied me with those terrible human eyes, deciding whether to take me now or save me for later. But the worst dreams were the ones where I went back, where I turned around at the tree line and walked back into those woods to help my friends. In these dreams, I always found them, but they were changed, twisted, wearing their own faces wrong, just like the creature had worn Bobby's face. And they always asked the same question. Why did you leave us, Tom? Why didn't you come back? I started drinking to sleep. Then I started drinking to get through the day. By January, I'd lost my job. By February, I'd lost my apartment. I moved into a boarding house in a rough part of town, the kind of place where people didn't ask questions and didn't expect answers. It was in that boarding house on a cold night in March that I met Walter Keene. Walter was an old man, maybe 70, with skin like weathered leather and eyes that had seen too much. He lived in the room next to mine, and one night when my nightmares had me screaming loud enough to wake the building, he knocked on my door. "You all right in there, son?" he called through the thin wood. I opened the door, still shaking, sweat soaking through my undershirt despite the cold. "Fine, just a bad dream." He studied me with those knowing eyes. Bad dream or a true dream? What's the difference? A bad dream you forget in the morning. A true dream stays with you forever. He gestured to my room. "Mind if I come in? I think we should talk." We sat at my small table, and I poured us both whiskey from the bottle I kept by my bed. Walter took a sip, nodded approvingly, then looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You've seen something," he said. It wasn't a question. "Something in the woods, something old." I felt my blood run cold. "How did you—" "Because I've seen it too. Different woods, different time, but the same thing. Or one of its kind." He took another drink. 1921. I was logging in Oregon with a crew of 12 men. We went into an area the locals warned us about, said there were things in those trees that didn't like visitors. We laughed at them, just like you probably laughed at whoever warned you. "The old woman," I whispered. "At the general store." Walter nodded. "There's always someone who tries to warn you, someone who knows the old rules, the old boundaries. Most times people don't listen. Can't really blame them. Sounds like superstition until you've seen it with your own eyes." "What happened to your crew?" "Same as yours, I suspect. We were hunted, picked off one by one. The thing in those Oregon woods looked different than what you saw, more bear than goat, but the pattern's the same. They mimic voices. They play with their prey. They make you choose." He leaned forward. "It made you choose, didn't it?" I couldn't speak, could only nod. "And you survived by crossing a boundary, an old line in the earth that even they have to respect." "How do you know all this?" "Because I've spent the last 32 years studying them, collecting stories, finding other survivors. There aren't many of us, but we're out there. People who walked out of the woods when they shouldn't have, people who carry the mark." He rolled up his sleeve, and I saw it, a scar on his forearm in a pattern that didn't quite make sense to the eye, symbols that seemed to shift when you looked directly at them. just like the marks I'd seen carved into that oak tree surrounded by hanging animal carcasses. "You have one too," Walter said. "You might not see it yet, but it's there. The mark of the thing that let you go. That claimed you for later." I looked at my own arms, my hands, searching for any sign of a mark. "I don't see anything." "You will. Usually appears in dreams first. Then one day you'll wake up and there it'll be, and you'll wonder how you never noticed it before." He paused. "But that's not the worst part." "What's the worst part?" "The waiting. Knowing it's out there. Knowing it'll come back eventually when you least expect it. Could be tomorrow, could be 50 years from now, but it always comes back. The mark doesn't wash off, son. It never does." The same words the Goatman had said to me. The same promise or threat or curse. "So what do I do?" I asked, hating how desperate I sounded. "How do I stop it?" Walter smiled sadly. "You don't. Best you can do is live your life in the meantime. Make it count. Do something that matters. Because when it comes for you, and it will come, at least you'll have lived rather than just waited to die." He stood to leave, then paused at the door. "One more thing. The others, your friends who didn't make it out, don't spend your life feeling guilty about surviving. What happened in those woods, the choices you made and they made, that wasn't you. That was what the creature makes people become. Fear and desperation can turn the best of men into something they don't recognize. Your friends don't blame you wherever they are, and you shouldn't blame yourself. How can you know that? Because my friends, the ones who didn't make it out of those Oregon woods, they visit me sometimes, in dreams, and they always say the same thing. It wasn't your fault, Walter. It wasn't your fault." He opened the door. "Your friends will tell you the same eventually. You just have to be willing to listen." After Walter left, I sat alone in my room, bottle in hand, thinking about his words, about living rather than waiting to die, about making the time I had left count for something. I looked at my reflection in the grimy window and made a decision. I would survive. Not just exist, not just wait for the Goatman to come claim what I owed, but actually live. For myself. For the friends who couldn't. And if the creature came for me tomorrow or in 50 years, at least I would have made my survival worth something. At least I would have earned the chance it gave me at that boundary line. The mark doesn't wash off. But maybe, just maybe, you can wear it with purpose rather than shame. I'm writing this in December of 1954, exactly 1 year after I walked out of those Maryland woods. I'm 30 years old. I have a new job, a small apartment in Pennsylvania, and something that almost resembles a normal life. But normal is a relative term when you're living under a curse. The mark appeared 3 months ago, just like Walter said it would. I'd been dreaming about the Goatman, nothing unusual, as those dreams never really stopped, when I woke with a burning sensation on my left shoulder blade. I twisted to look in the mirror, and there it was, a symbol burned into my skin, the same geometric patterns I'd seen carved into that oak tree in the forest. It doesn't hurt anymore, but I can always feel it there, a constant reminder of what's waiting for me. I tracked down Walter Keene again, found him still living in that same boarding house. He looked at the mark and nodded knowingly. "It's set now," he said. "The claim is official. You're on borrowed time, son." "How long do I have?" He shrugged. "My mark appeared in 1923. I'm still here in 1954, 31 years and counting. But I've met others who only lasted a few months after the mark showed up. There's no pattern to it, no way to predict. The creature comes when it comes." "Have you ever tried to fight it, to break the curse?" Walter laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "Oh, I've tried everything. Holy water, blessed salt, protective circles, every folk remedy and ritual I could find. None of it works. The old things, the ones that walked the earth before humans gave them names, they don't follow our rules. They barely even notice our attempts at protection. So we just wait to die? We wait to die, or we live until we're called. Your choice which one you do in the meantime." He poured us both whiskey, our ritual now, whenever I visited. I chose to live. Got married in 1930, had 3 kids, saw them grow up, go to college, start families of their own. If the thing from the Oregon woods comes for me tomorrow, I'll go knowing I built something, loved people, mattered to someone. And you're not scared? Terrified, he admitted, every damn day. But fear's just another way of feeling alive, isn't it? Better to be scared and living than numb and waiting. I've thought a lot about Walter's words, about choosing to live rather than just waiting to be claimed. It's harder than it sounds. Every shadow looks like cloven hooves. Every distant sound could be that terrible scream laugh. I catch glimpses of things in my peripheral vision, horned silhouettes, human eyes watching from impossible places. But when I turn to look directly, there's nothing there. The worst is when I hear voices calling my name. Sometimes it's my mother. Sometimes it's Bobby or Marcus or Charlie or Jim or Pete. Sometimes it's people I've never met, voices I don't recognize, but that sound intimately familiar, like they're calling to some part of me I didn't know existed. I never answer. I never look. I remember the old woman's warning, even now. If you hear something calling to you at night, something that sounds like someone you know, don't answer. Don't even look. That's been my rule this past year. Don't answer, don't acknowledge, don't engage. Whether it's actually the Goatman or just my traumatized mind playing tricks, the result is the same. I keep walking, keep my eyes forward, keep surviving. But I wonder sometimes if the others are still out there. If some part of Marcus and Jim and Pete and Charlie and Bobby still exists in those woods, trapped in whatever hell the Goatman created for them. I wonder if they blame me for surviving. I wonder if they even remember who they were, or if the creature has twisted them into something that only wears their memories like it wore Bobby's face. I tried to go back once. In July, 6 Biasin, months after the mark appeared. I drove to Maryland, found the general store where we'd stopped before our camping trip. The old woman who'd warned us was gone, died of a stroke the previous winter, the current shopkeeper told me. But before she died, she'd left a message. "You one of those camping boys?" the shopkeeper asked when I mentioned looking for information about the woods near Fletchertown Road. "I am." He pulled out a faded envelope from beneath the counter. "Old Sarah left this before she passed. Said if any of those boys came back, I was to give it to them. Been sitting here for months." Inside was a single piece of paper with shaky handwriting. "Don't come back. The boundary protected you once, but it won't protect you twice. The old things remember debts, and you owe a debt unpaid. Live your life away from this place. Die old if you can. Die young if you must, but don't die here. These woods claim enough souls. Don't give them yours before you have to. Sarah Pritchard." I didn't go into those woods. I stood at the tree line, looking into that darkness, feeling the pull of the place like a fishhook in my chest. Some part of me wanted to walk back in, to face the Goatman, to end this waiting and uncertainty, to find my friends or what was left of them. But I thought about Walter's words, about living rather than waiting to die, about making my survival count for something. So I turned around and walked away. Again. It's been 5 months since then, and I'm still here, still alive, still marked, still waiting. I've started writing down everything that happened, everything I remember from those 2 days in the Maryland woods. This document you're reading, whether you're listening to this story in 1954 or decades later, is my testament, my warning, my way of making sure that what happened to us doesn't happen to others. If you ever find yourself planning a camping trip to the deep woods of Maryland or Oregon or any of the old forests where the locals warn you not to go, listen to them. Listen to the old women at general stores. Listen to the stories that sound like superstition. Listen to that voice in your head that tells you something feels wrong about a place. Because some stories aren't just stories, some warnings aren't just superstition, and some things that shouldn't exist according to modern science and rational thought don't care about your beliefs. They exist anyway, in the dark places where human civilization hasn't yet reached, in the old-growth forests that remember when they were the whole world. The Goatman is real. It's been real since before we had names for things like it. It will be real long after we're gone. And it's patient. It has all the time in the world to wait for what it's owed. I don't know when it will come for me. Could be tonight. Could be when I'm 80 years old and have grandchildren. Could be in the space between this sentence and the next, but it will come. The mark doesn't wash off. The debt doesn't expire. All I can do until then is live. Really live, not just exist. Love people, help others. Make my survival mean something more than just being the one who got away. And maybe, if I'm very lucky, when the Goatman finally comes to collect what I owe, I'll be able to look it in those terrible human eyes and say, I lived. You let me cross that boundary and I didn't waste it. I made it count. Maybe that won't matter to it. Maybe it will take me screaming into the darkness just like it took the others. But at least I'll have lived. At least I'll have tried. So that's the story of the 1953 Goatman encounter. The story of 6 men who went camping and only one came back. The story of Thomas Whitmore, who survived something that shouldn't exist and has been living on borrowed time ever since. What do you think? Was Thomas's survival a gift or a curse? Do you think the creature will ever come for him? Or was the mark just a way to torture him for the rest of his life? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this story disturbing, if it made you think twice about your next camping trip, then it did its job. Because some places aren't meant for us. Some boundaries exist for a reason. And some old warnings are warnings for a reason. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more true horror stories from the darkest corners of American history. And remember, if you're ever in the deep woods and you hear something calling your name in a voice you recognize, don't answer. Don't even look. Just keep walking. The mark doesn't wash off. It never does.